Hey, Guobveil here. Today's video is on a very special man being the only hunt in an ocean of elation releases. He is a satisfyingly strong damage dealer that also boasts supportive capabilities, and he is a kit designed to greatly support the follow-up meta, whenever that comes back. Let's check out his abilities and how they work, followed by his eidolons and my calculations on how good they are. We'll then go through his best builds in both playstyles and finish with synergies and teams. Like and sub if you want to catch the insane amount of guides coming soon for 4.2 by yours truly, and let's begin. Ashveil is a lightning hunt character that boasts the highest attack in the game, just like his fellow hunter Dr. Ratio. They're also both follow-up attack DPS, curious. To compensate, and as a hunt character, he has paper-thin defenses though. His energy cost is also decently high, but he has innate energy gains to help out. Anyways, when investing into Ashveil, I would recommend getting his skill, ultimate, and talent all up, with his skill being the first focus if caring mostly about his supportive playstyle. But onto his abilities, and starting with his skill. This ability marks an enemy as bait and deals damage. If the target is already marked with bait, then he deals a little bit of extra damage and then recovers 1 skill point, effectively making him SP neutral if not target swapping with this skill. Now, bait is automatically applied by Ashveil whenever bait is missing, and it will be inflicted onto the enemy target with the lowest HP on the field. This means even at the start of combat, but also when killing the enemy who previously had bait, Ashveil will just apply bait to a new enemy immediately without requiring his action. So this first means his skill should always now be refunding SP, unless again you need to swap where bait is applied. And so what does bait actually do? Well, in this skill, it will reduce all enemies' defense by 40%. Who needs Nihility and effect hit rate when you can just have a permanent 40% def reduction in this guy's kit? 40% def reduction is in a vacuum a 27.22% DPS increase for your whole team, and as we all know, def scales the more you get of it, so you have an even nicer boost for any def ignore vertical investment gamers you play with, like Feishao with her S1 for instance. And the other things bait does are in his talent. When the target with this mark is attacked by another ally target, so not himself, Ashveil will regenerate a fixed 8 energy, fixed meaning not scaling with energy regenerate. What also happens is that if he has a point of charge when the bait enemy is attacked, he will consume a point of charge and perform a follow-up attack. So how do we get charges now? Well, he can stack up to 3, and you can see the amount he has in his character icon UI bottom left. He starts with 2 charges in a fight or 3 if you use his technique, so he starts with 3 in most game environments. However, the only actual way to gain points of charge in combat is through his ultimate. When using this, he will yet again mark an enemy with bait, allowing him to swap bait targets without using SP or having to be in his turn. He really is a master of baiting. After that, he deals damage to the target selected, then he performs an enhanced follow-up attack and gains 3 points of charge for his talent. This enhanced follow-up attack will scale the same as his talent's follow-up, but does not consume charge. Furthermore, for every 4 stacks of Gluttony you have, he will consume 4 stacks and deal additional instances of damage, repeating until Gluttony drops below 4 stacks. But what's really cool about this enhanced follow-up attack is that if it kills an enemy, it will then deal those additional damage instances to the next target with bait. And since that is instantly applied upon death of the previous bait enemy, it leads to big chain kills like this. A hunt character using their single target power in an interesting way. So now, how do we get Gluttony? First off, Gluttony stacks until 12 times at E0, and when performing his follow-up attack he grants himself 2 stacks. Every ultimate rotation gives us 3 charge and a follow-up, which means we get 8 Gluttony guaranteed. So we are missing 4 for an ideal 12 during the ultimate. Luckily, his A2 gives us 2 more ways of getting it. When using his skill, he grants himself 1 stack, and on ults he grants himself 2. On top of that, if an enemy dies during his follow-up attack, he also gets 1. So we have ult giving us 4 straight up, into 3 follow-ups for 6 more, and then we need 2 skills or a skill and a follow-up kill. And remember that kill chain from before? Gluttony is stacking with every kill, meaning in Pure Fiction, for instance, you could slam dunk 5 enemies in one move with ult kill, into follow-up on another, into 3 instances of damage. It's very satisfying. So anyways, charge is for his follow-up attacks, bait is the mark he applies and uses for various effects, and Gluttony is a stacking resource through his abilities that he consumes during his ultimate. To finish off his base kit, Ashveil's A4 trace buffs that follow-up even more with a straight-up 80% damage bonus and is stacking 10% additional amount per point of Gluttony held. Really nice stuff. His final trace gives the whole team a 40% crit damage buff, so another amp effect in our little DPS friend. But if you're a follow-up gamer, you get an additional 80% crit damage to those too. Not only is this another large self-buff for Ashveil, but it ranges from a decent to very powerful ally buff effect depending on their damage profile. Crit damage is abundant, sure, but on a 200% crit damage main DPS, a buff of 40% is still a 13.3% DPS increase. And a 120% crit damage buff is a 40% DPS increase, which is kinda stupid on top of that def reduction. Now it's Eidolon time, and his E1 starts off with even more amplification, just like the OG Topaz. Ashveil gets a varying damage taken debuff in his E1 that gets stronger when the enemy is low. Again, this is with no application needed, apparently he just has enough aura to apply it automatically everywhere. E2 increases his max stacks of Gluttony to 18, and then refunds 35% of consumed Gluttony after an enhanced follow-up attack. This all means that we get even more damage percent from his A4, but also get more extra damage instances during his ultimate. Not bad, but not your usual OP E2. E4 is then a permanent 40% attack, considering he will easily ult before every 3 turns. Not bad considering his base attack, but just a stepping stone as always. And finally, E6 reduces enemies all-type res by 20%, El Clasico, and then he gets a permanent stacking damage percent buff for Gluttony stacks acquired up to 120%. The poor guy has too much damage percent at this point, but it is a considerable buff to his DPAV. So here are my Eidolon simulations for Ashveil. The E1 and E2 are decent upgrades, but not the crazy stuff you're used to on a DPS, whereas the E6 is quite chunky but far away. When he is put into a team with a DPS, these will inevitably fall off, barring the E1, which will remain somewhat strong as it is a team-wide amplification effect rather than just personal damage. E6 likewise, but that's E6. So what do I think of Ashveil? Well, they did the Sparksy thing again, back to back, and released a sub-DPS kit before their main DPS actually came out. He has inbuilt def reduction, ally crit damage, extra ally follow-up crit damage, and then vulnerability on E1 and S1. Maybe they're avoiding how Anaxa released after the Herta and are instead releasing the sub-DPSs first to balance the main DPS appropriately? I have no idea. But right now, his kit is decent as a main DPS. He has a nice ceiling too, with lots of possible optimization and strong single target performance that can adapt into non-single targets somewhat. His kit reminds me of Anaxa too, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get constant, low-cost, 0 cycles from him with RMC and Ting Yun. I think he's a top-tier carry, but I guess that's natural for a new release, and his NG issues are being patched up by Nikador appearing here and there. But him being able to 40k pure fiction with a cheap team is definitely interesting, and I hope it isn't just a one-off, but he feels kinda nice here despite being Hunt. Like Archer, he can brute force the main target, or he can alternatively whack the side enemies if his damage versus the main boss is lackluster. HP inflation will hurt this way of fighting though. As for his sub-DPS role, right now it's fantastic. I mean, he obliterates Topaz in amping and damage, it's just you'd much rather run him as a main DPS right now. He doesn't Omega boost them like Dahlia did with Super Break because he's not a pure support after all. So if you love him, pull him. If you want to boost old follow-up carries that bad, you can pull him, but just know it won't necessarily save them. And if you want to run him as a main DPS, go ahead. But just like I said with Sparksy, if you want to wait until we know who and what he's actually made for, skip right ahead. Anyways, if you're pulling him, it's then on to build time. Thanks to his follow-up attack having a complete mess of numbers and hits, the Grand Duke set is maximized to its fullest potential and thus gives us by far the strongest increase among Relic sets. Nothing comes close except for Pioneer. The only other set you could swap out for is Niche Eagle setups, but I wouldn't even use that for main DPS Ashveil as his turns aren't very impactful. Instead, his damage is all about that ult as well as the charges from said ult, and that is mostly batteried by allies rather than a skill here or there extra. Sub-DPS setups may use this though. Now, unlike Relics, his planars are much more enjoyable to farm with 5 great options. We have Duran, the new 4.1 planar, City of Converging Stars, Banana Amusement Park if using him with Danhang PT, which you should be, and good old inner Sao Soto. Finally, there is Izumo, but only if he's with a Hunt friend. Literally use whichever you want, with City of Converging Stars being best with another strong DPS in the team thanks to it buffing everyone's crit damage. In the main DPS team, it's a little behind Duran though. Your main stats will be crit rate chest, attack or speed boots, damage or attack orb, and an attack or energy rope. He self-buffs crit damage a ton and has no crit rate in traces, so you're very likely going to need the crit rate chest for a decent ratio. For boots, it is dependent on his role, and if main DPS, then dependent on your team. As a sub DPS, you should opt for speed for more turns generally, for example with Fei Xiao, but whether it's optimal with future carries, we'll have to wait and see. As a main DPS, you should go attack percent boots unless running him with Sunday or I guess Bronya on a 135-134 setup. For the orb, both work, but damage percent calcs better in my preferred team with him, and since we can run both attack boots and rope on him, we got a lot more than usual. Obviously, this can vary per team. For instance, when running with Sunday, you get a lot more damage percent and lose attack percent versus when running with Sparkle. And for the rope, I mostly recommend attack percent. If you use energy, it's because you've either got a breakpoint you're playing around or you're playing in pure fiction. A lot of his energy is fixed, so energy regen won't work. But in pure fiction, where you get tons of kills and hit energy, or fights like Nikador where you gain energy that can scale on energy regen, then the rope can be swapped out. And if running him with Tingyun or Sunday, I would just stick with attack percent. So for a stat goal, let's go for the classic 100% crit rate in combat thanks to his large self-crit damage buffs and traces, along with commonly played supports that give a ton more. Then crit damage can be something like 150% pre-buffs. For attack, aim for around 3000 attack depending on mains, and you'll get more from ally buffs and Lushakas anyways. And finally for speed, opt for base if using him with any advancer not named Sunday or Bronya. Otherwise, with them, aim for the usual 135 for the -1 speed setup with 100% advance forward. And that kind of speed is also fine as sub DPS. By the way, when he gets his full new team in the future, I'll go over his definitive stat goals and build again. Now for Lycones, his one is kind of juicy with a high base attack, 18% crit rate, 40% attack, and a permanent 20% vulnerability onto all enemies. You get a large damage boost for himself and his team, so it can scale well into his two playstyles. Will it be necessary? Well, for his damage it's big, but since we don't have his full team, we don't need to vertical just yet. Just like Sparksy and Elation, we can always wait and see before moving, there is no rush. I think if you are going for E1 or S1 right now though, I would recommend the S1 due to it being similar or better in damage amp when he's a main DPS, still close when he's a sub DPS, but then it also being cheaper and being able to be played on other characters. For other options, we first have Baptism of Pure Thought as an excellent replacement for his own damage. In fact, if running him with a crit rate buffer like Sunday that can make up for the crit rate loss from his signature, it is a very strong option. Archer's signature also performs just fine, but only if using Sparkle in his team. And then he has a few other decent options, some conditional, some with uptime issues. Now, finishing with teams, let's begin with main carry Ashveil. You'll want to pair him with an advancer and a non-advancer support, and then a sustain. For his advanced support, first I recommend Remembrance MC and then Sparkle or Sunday. RMC's synergy here is immaculate. We have a unit that can attack on their turn, one that attacks additionally through Mem, and then has an attacking ultimate, all battering Ashveil greatly with 8 fixed energy every time they hit the bait target. This is all whilst providing very strong amp including true damage to help avoid some of the saturated buffs from other supports. Ashveil getting lots of energy also in turn batteries Mem up to advance him even more. But it's not just Ashveil gaining loads of energy. In my favorite team with him, RMC, Tribi, and Danheng PT, everyone is battering each other. Constant attack spams means Tribi energy, constant attacks from Ashveil means Danheng energy, all these guys' attacks means Ashveil energy, and energy in general is getting us Mem charge. It feels so good. Anyway, Sparkle and Sunday are still excellent picks, but they lack attacks. Sparkle also notably gives us skill points we don't even need on his main carry team since we are SP neutral, but her amp is excellent enough that we don't mind too much. Sunday gives more turns and weaker amp, but he does offer much better energy gains for Ashveil, with additional turns over Sparkle and a chunky amount gifted every ultimate. Since Elation MC may be taking RMC's job away, at least you have other options. For the non-advanced support, you can go many options, which is what's cool about Ashveil. Tingyun is actually amazing, especially if not using Sunday, as she offers nice amp, a bunch of energy every ult, and dance of course on top. But the attack procs are the real deal. Follow-up DPS like him spam out so many attacks, and Tingyun adding these extra multipliers every time is very potent. It's a unique type of buff we don't really get. But the most used support here would likely be Tribi. In multi-target fights, her power is very strong for Ashveil. So many attacks on her end means Ashveil can ult very frequently, and she offers us 2 rare buff types for his damage. In lower target fights, we of course also have Silverwolf as a Tribi replacement. She also attacks on all abilities, even her skill, unlike most supports, which can be a real boon since his teams sometimes have too much SP and end up wasting some. I'd say you can also use Cypher, I just don't like her patron targeting working opposite to Ashveil's bait targeting. Might as well use her elsewhere, but her attack frequency is also decent for him outside of the fact that she will hold on to her ultimate. You can even probably run 2 non-advances in some cases like with Dance Dance Dance, but some example teams from these 2 support combos would be RMC Tribi, RMC Ting Yun, Sunday Tribi, Baku Silverwolf. For the sustain, the synergy he has with Danheng PT is too good to ignore. He really is the follow-up sustain right now. The amount of attacks Ashveil can pull off means Soul Dragon is constantly acting, and it also means Dan is constantly ulting. He's therefore one of the highest attack frequency sustains for the team, which is perfect for Ashveil, and he also provides damage amping benefits on top. Aventurine is good in Ashveil teams for a similar reason, where loads of enemy attacks means Aventurine can spam out his own for his main carry. If running sustainers, you would then opt for any of the previous supports in the final slot. So RMC Tribi Ting Yun sounds like an excellent low-cost zero cycle composition with double dance, for example. Just good luck with his super low base defense and HP. As for sub DPS Ashveil, the only top tier synergy will be with Fei Xiao, a unit that loves the constant spam of attacks he will be performing. And with her barrage of skill into follow-up, you won't be missing out on Ashveil energy either. With her, Tribi, and Dan PT, you have a nice dual DPS composition. And then I guess Dr. Ratio likes his kit a little more than others if you are vertically invested, as he will give 1 Death Shred debuff and then 1 to 2 vulnerability debuffs at all times with E1 and or S1. Nice for his debuff based kit. It's just here we've gone all the way back to 1.6 now. Any follow-up centric carry can use his kit well, so JD1 was fun in Apoc Shadow and Pure Fiction for instance. Yun Li can, Jing Yuan can. It's just again pulling for an old DPS and you'd rather use him by himself. They also don't get any notable extra synergies, whereas someone like Fei Xiao at least gets the attack frequency benefit. And then his kit at E1, S1 can kinda go anywhere I guess, with a lot of Vuln, crit damage, follow-up crit damage, Death Shred, and his own damage on top, but I wouldn't pull E1, S1 to do just that when you could probably invest into better universal supports instead. So you'll see meme synergies, but I don't want to recommend people to pull for those. Anyways, that's all on this awesome guy. I can't wait to see his full team, and until then, we at least have a competent main DPS who might surprise us. So let me know below your thoughts on him and whether you're pulling. Thanks for watching, thanks to my amazing YouTube members, and have a Guoba day.